Let's talk about your 30s, because for a lot of people, this decade comes with a quiet pressure that no one really prepares you for. By the time you hit your 30s, you're supposed to have things figured out, right? Career locked in, money under control, relationships stable, confidence unshakable. But if you're being honest, for many of us, the 30s don't feel like a victory lap, they feel like a reality check. So today, I want to talk about what you should have accomplished by your 30s, not according to social media, not according to your parents, and definitely not according to that one friend who seems to have everything together. I'm talking about what actually matters. And before we go any further, let me say this clearly. If you're in your 30s and feel behind, you're not broken. You're not late. You're not failing at life. Your 30s are less about arriving somewhere and more about finally understanding yourself well enough to move with intention. One of the biggest things you should have started developing by your 30s is self-awareness. Not just knowing what you like, but understanding why you do what you do, why you react the way you do, why certain situations drain you and others light you up. By this point, you should be able to look at your past and say, okay, I see the patterns now. You may not have healed everything, and that's okay, but you should at least recognize your triggers, your habits, and your blind spots. Because self-awareness is the foundation for every other improvement you'll make in life. In your 20s, you can blame circumstances. In your 30s, you start taking responsibility. Another big shift that should happen by your 30s is how you define success. In your 20s, success often looks borrowed. It's what you were told to want: the job title, the income number, the lifestyle aesthetic. But by your 30s, you should start asking harder questions. Do I actually want this, or am I chasing it because it looks good to others? Does this lifestyle support my mental health or just my ego? Success in your 30s becomes more personal. It's less about impressing people and more about building a life you don't constantly need a break from. That brings us to career. By your 30s, you don't need to have your dream job. That idea is overrated anyway. What you should have is direction. You should understand your strengths, what you're good at, and how you create value. You may still pivot, you may still change industries, but you're no longer throwing darts in the dark. You're making informed decisions instead of desperate ones. And just as important, you should know what you won't tolerate anymore. Toxic environments, constant burnout, being underpaid and overworked with no growth in sight. Your 30s teach you that ambition without boundaries will burn you out fast. Let's talk about money, because this is a big one. By your 30s, money stops being just about fun and freedom and starts being about stability and options. You don't need to be rich, but you should have control. That means knowing where your money goes, having some savings, understanding debt instead of ignoring it. Financial maturity isn't about how much you make, it's about how well you manage what you have. Peace of mind becomes more valuable than flashy spending. And you start realizing that money is a tool, not a scoreboard. Another major accomplishment by your 30s is learning how to take care of your health, not reactively, but proactively. In your 20s, your body forgives a lot. In your 30s, it starts sending reminders. This is the decade where sleep matters, movement matters, stress management matters. Not because you're old, but because you finally understand that your energy is one of your most valuable assets. You don't need a perfect routine. You just need consistency and respect for your body, because the habits you build now will either support you or cost you later. Now let's talk about relationships, because this area changes a lot in your 30s. By now, you should have a clearer sense of who deserves access to you and who doesn't. You stop forcing connections. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You choose quality over quantity. Your circle may get smaller, and that's not a loss. It's refinement. Romantically, you stop confusing intensity with compatibility. You understand that peace, communication, and shared values matter more than chaos and chemistry alone. Even if you're single, the goal by your 30s isn't to avoid loneliness, and it's to build a relationship with yourself that doesn't depend on external validation. Another important accomplishment is emotional regulation. Life doesn't get easier in your 30s, but you get better at handling it. You don't spiral as easily. You pause before reacting. You learn that not everything deserves your energy or your response. You realize that protecting your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. And finally, by your 30s, you should have developed a long-term mindset. You start thinking beyond immediate gratification. You consider consequences. You plant seeds even when you won't see results right away. Whether that's investing, learning new skills, strengthening relationships, or working on personal growth, you understand that consistency beats urgency. Your 30s are where you stop rushing and start building. So if you're in your 30s and feel like you haven't accomplished enough, I want you to hear this. This decade isn't about checking boxes. It's about alignment. It's about knowing yourself, choosing intentionally, letting go of what no longer fits, and building a life that feels solid, not just successful on the surface. And if you're still figuring it out, you're right on time.